I used to think I was just sensitive. Like maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it wasn't that my parents loved my brother more. They just showed it in a different way. You know, the way people say love languages differ? Except in my case, the language they spoke to Carter was affection, praise, and money, and the one they used with me was indifference, silence, and the occasional backhanded compliment. My name's Sabrina Lowell, and I've been the afterthought in my own family for as long as I can remember. Carter, my younger brother by 3 years, has always been the golden boy. The miracle baby. Mom used to say he was the child she prayed for. I used to wonder what that made me, an accident? A warm-up act? I was 10 when I realized she never said those words about me. Not once. Carter's life has been a string of participation trophies and second chances. When he barely scraped by in high school with D's, they blamed the teachers. They don't know how to motivate boys, Dad would say, shaking his head like it was a national tragedy. When he crashed Mom's car at 17 because he was texting Michelle. Yes, that Michelle. Mom covered the damage and grounded him for exactly 1 day. He threw a tantrum and the next morning there he was, keys in hand, driving to Starbucks. Meanwhile, I was making honor roll, doing student council, holding down part-time jobs at the bookstore and the bakery on weekends. I paid for my own SAT tutoring with tip money. When I got into college on a scholarship, I remember standing in the kitchen, beaming, acceptance letter in hand. Mom looked up from her coffee and said, "Well, that's what we expected from you, sweetie." No hug. No excitement. Just an expectation fulfilled. The thing is, I stopped being surprised after a while. You just learn to carry the disappointment differently. Quietly. You stop hoping for applause and start clapping for yourself. And then came my wedding. 2 years ago I married James, the one solid, steady force in my life. He's calm where I'm anxious, warm where I've gone cold. He met my parents twice before the wedding. They barely made conversation. My mother asked him if he planned to make real money eventually, because he worked in finance but not at a major firm yet. We were on a budget. We planned a small backyard ceremony at his aunt's house. It was charming, simple, heartfelt. We invited about 50 people. I hand-pressed flowers into our wedding invitations and baked our own wedding favors. I called my parents 3 weeks before the big day to confirm they were coming. They told me they couldn't make it. Said they'd already booked a 10-day Alaskan cruise, non-refundable. It was a Christmas gift to ourselves, Dad said. You understand, right? I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat closed up. I just stared at the wall as I nodded into the phone, silent. $300. That's what they sent. No card. Just a check with wedding gift in the memo. Carter later told me Mom had felt bad about not going, but what's done is done. We used that money to rent chairs. And I told myself it was okay. That my real family, the one James and I were building, was what mattered. The day was still beautiful. Our friends danced barefoot on the grass. I cried during our vows. James kissed my forehead during our first dance, and I remember thinking, this is the life I choose. This is where I begin. But it's hard to forget. The empty chairs in the back. The voice in my head that whispered they didn't show up for you. They never do. So when Carter got engaged last year, I knew what was coming. I knew it before they even asked me to help with the planning. It started with the announcement. Michelle posted it on Instagram before they even called the family. A perfectly staged photo. Her hand on Carter's chest, diamond front and center, both of them lit in golden hour lighting. Captioned, he asked and I said yes. My phone buzzed for 2 hours with cousins texting, did you see? Then the wedding planning began. And oh, did the floodgates open. My parents, who had once told me weddings were a waste of money for people who can't invest in their future, suddenly became wedding aficionados. They took out loans, dipped into savings, called in every favor they had. Michelle wanted a vineyard wedding? Done. A $6,000 cake made with imported Belgian chocolate and hand-sculpted sugar flowers? Ordered. Custom-made invitation boxes that sang when opened? I wish I were kidding. My mother hired a string quartet from New York, flew in a makeup artist from LA, and paid for Michelle's bachelorette trip to Turks and Caicos. The same woman who couldn't drive 2 hours to my wedding because of a non-refundable cruise, was now spending thousands on silk chair covers. They sent out save the dates to every extended family member, most of whom had forgotten I existed. And when the family group chat was created, called Carter and Michelle's Big Day Party Popper, I was added, sure. But no one ever asked for my input. I was just there. A spectator. It didn't take long for the old bitterness to resurface. I tried to keep it buried. Told myself to rise above it. But the wounds? They weren't healed. They were just covered in a flimsy band-aid of time. I started noticing things too. Little digs. Subtle reminders of where I stood. Like when Mom told Michelle, "I always wanted a daughter who loved dressing up like you do," right in front of me. Or when Dad laughed and said, "Carter finally brought someone home we actually like," then looked right at me and added, "No offense, Sabrina." I laughed along. Because what else do you do? Blow up at brunch? And the worst part? I had convinced myself that showing up was the mature thing to do. That attending this circus of a wedding was me being the bigger person. But deep down I felt it brewing. The ache. The tension. That tight, hot coil of injustice curling in my chest. I didn't know it yet, but this wedding wasn't just another insult. It was a match. And it was about to light the fire I'd been holding back for years. The morning of the wedding was all pastel roses, glass flutes, and staged perfection. I stood by the fountain in the courtyard, watching guests arrive in coordinated shades of champagne and blush. The venue was everything you'd expect from someone trying to buy a Pinterest board dream. Picturesque vineyard, white drapery blowing in the breeze, strings playing Coldplay like it was classical. I was already regretting coming. James, my husband, tried to keep me grounded. He looked sharp in his charcoal gray suit, ever my anchor. He kept checking in with a squeeze of my hand or a small smile, but he could tell I wasn't okay. I hadn't been okay since we arrived. The first blow came when we checked in at the guest table. "Last name?" the girl in pearls asked without looking up. "Lowell," I said, forcing a smile. She scanned the seating chart taped to her clipboard. Nope, I don't see that here. Maybe you're under your husband's name. Try James Lowell?" James offered gently. The girl checked again, then looked up, a little too chirpy. "Oh. You're in the overflow section. We had to add a few last-minute tables on the terrace." Overflow. Like I was a stranger in my own family. We followed her around the corner to a cramped row of 3 tables next to the valet driveway. Our chairs wobbled on the gravel. From that spot, you couldn't even hear the ceremony music clearly. I could already feel the bruise forming on my dignity. I didn't say anything to my parents. I could see them from afar, smiling, laughing, absolutely radiant. My mother looked like she belonged in a bridal magazine. Pearls, flawless makeup, a glow I hadn't seen on her in years. And it wasn't even her wedding. It was his. Carter's. The golden boy. When the ceremony started, everyone stood. Michelle floated down the aisle in a custom off-white gown that looked more expensive than my car. Carter stood at the altar grinning like a kid who just got everything he asked for on Christmas morning. My mom dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Dad looked proud in that loud, smug way he reserved only for Carter. I waited for the sting of tears. But none came. I just felt numb. After the ceremony, we moved into the reception area. This glamorous tented space with chandeliers hanging like icicles and gold-rimmed glassware on every table. I made the mistake of looking for my name on the seating chart again. I wasn't on it. I double-checked, thinking maybe I'd missed it. James did too. It wasn't there. "Maybe they didn't update it," he said quietly, but I could tell even he was bothered. We returned to the overflow terrace, where our name cards had been scribbled last minute in Sharpie. Everyone else had elegant calligraphy. We had all-caps block letters like name tags at a school play. I took a sip of wine, but it tasted sour in my mouth. Then came the slideshow. A massive screen rose behind the head table. Music played, soft, sentimental. Photos of Carter growing up appeared in sequence. Baby pictures, toddler bath time, middle school basketball, prom with Michelle, their vacations, their engagement shoot. Everyone oohed and awed like they were watching a royal documentary. Halfway through, I leaned closer to James and whispered, "Do you see a single picture of me?" He shook his head slowly. "Not one. Not of us as kids. Not one Christmas morning. Not one family photo." I didn't exist in their curated version of family history. I wanted to walk out. But I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of me breaking down. Then my father stood up. Fork against glass. Tink tink tink. The room fell silent. He smiled like a man standing at the top of a life well lived and began. "We're just so proud of Carter," he said. "He's grown into the kind of man we always hoped he would be. Loyal, ambitious, charming. He's everything a father could dream of in a son. And today is the day our family feels complete. Complete. That word rang in my ears like a slap. Complete. As if I was just a placeholder until Carter married someone photogenic enough to post. My mother sniffled loudly, nodding in agreement. I looked around, just hoping, that someone else had caught how absurd this all was. But everyone clapped. Raised glasses. Smiled. Except James. He leaned toward me again. His voice low, urgent. We need to go. I blinked. What? We need to go. Now. I thought maybe he was overwhelmed by the same emotions. Maybe he'd had enough of watching me be erased in real time. But there was something different in his voice. Tense. Pulled. I touched his arm. What's going on? He looked me in the eye, really looked at me and said, I need to show you something. And you're not going to want to wait until dessert. And just like that, the bottom dropped out of my stomach. James doesn't do drama. He's calm to a fault. But now his grip on my hand tightened, and his eyes scanned the crowd like someone watching for a fire exit. I nodded slowly. We stood up quietly. No one noticed, not even my parents. We slipped out the side, down the gravel path, past the violinist playing Ed Sheeran like it was Vivaldi. I didn't know where we were going. But something told me this wasn't just about bad seating or childhood wounds. This was about something much, much bigger. And the people laughing behind us had no idea what was about to come crashing down. We pulled out of the venue in complete silence. James drove like he was on autopilot, focused, jaw tight, hands clenched on the steering wheel. I didn't ask questions right away. I couldn't. The knot in my stomach told me that whatever he was about to reveal wasn't small. And if I was honest, a part of me didn't want to hear it. Not yet. Not after the emotional sucker punches I'd just taken inside that tent. But I had to say something. James, I finally murmured, where are we going? His eyes stayed forward. I need you to trust me. We're only about 10 minutes out. That's when the dread fully kicked in. James wasn't a cryptic man. He was the type who explained taxes with diagrams, who triple-checked our grocery lists, who talked through every life decision like a team meeting. For him to whisk me away in the middle of an event like this, without warning, without explanation, meant one thing. Something was very, very wrong. We pulled into a half-empty parking lot outside a dull tan office building with faded lettering that read Stanton and Elridge Accounting. The kind of place you'd overlook if you weren't looking for it. I blinked, trying to place it. Then I remembered. My parents used them. For everything. Texas. Estate management. The trust my grandmother left us. I turned to James slowly. What are we doing here? He cut the engine and reached into the back seat, pulling out a slim black folder, the kind he used at work. Neat, precise. I noticed a red sticker on one corner labeled confidential. Sabrina, he said, turning toward me for the first time since we left the wedding. I didn't want to bring this up today. I was hoping, honestly praying, that I was wrong. That the numbers were just wrong. But they're not. I stared at him. What numbers? He opened the folder and handed me the first sheet, a printed bank statement. It wasn't ours. It was titled Lowell Family Trust, Granddaughter subsection. My stomach turned cold. This is the trust, he continued. The one your grandmother set up before she passed. Remember? It was supposed to be untouched until you turned 30. I nodded. I hadn't thought about it in a while. My grandmother, bless her soul, always said she wanted me to chase my dreams without worry. I was 27 now, and James and I had talked about using it later. Maybe for a business, maybe a down payment for something bigger. But we'd never touched it. James flipped to the next page. This shows 2 large withdrawals, he said, tapping the line with his finger. One was about 8 months ago, $45,000. The next was 3 months ago, $102,000. I stared at the numbers like they were in another language. What are you saying? I'm saying, Sabrina, he said quietly, your parents used your inheritance to pay for Carter's wedding. The world slowed. My ears started ringing. I blinked hard trying to process, but my brain felt fuzzy. No, they wouldn't. I mean, that money, it's locked. Right? It's protected. Only if the trustees follow the rules, he replied. And guess who the trustees were? My voice cracked. My parents. James nodded. Exactly. I opened my mouth, then closed it. My heart was thudding in my chest, a rising panic curling around my spine. But Why wouldn't the lawyer tell me? They didn't, he said. But I asked. Quietly. I told them I was reviewing finances and came across some irregularities. Once I had power of attorney during our refinancing paperwork, I had a legal angle to ask for clarification. That's when I realized he had been working on this for weeks. Possibly months. Behind the scenes, while I was stressing over family dynamics and feeling like I didn't belong, James had been piecing together the truth. He pulled out another page, a printed email. It gets worse, he said. Your mom emailed the accountant last April. I got this with some pushback, but the wording is crystal clear. I read it. Fully. Can we use some of Sabrina's portion now? She'll never notice and we'll replace it later. Carter and Michelle really deserve a special day, and Sabrina won't be turning 30 for a while. We'll cover it before then. The words blurred on the page. They stole from me, I whispered. James didn't respond. He didn't have to. I was shaking now, not from fear but rage. White hot and rising. All those years of being overlooked. Forgotten. Treated like a footnote while Carter was the headline. And now they had taken what little security my grandmother left me, something meant for me, and spent it on custom flower arches and imported sea base. I stood up from the car, folder in hand, pacing the asphalt like I might explode. They told me they couldn't even come to my wedding, I said, half laughing, half sobbing. Because of a cruise they couldn't cancel. But they planned this circus for Carter and spent 6 figures of my money on it. James got out of the car and came around to me. His hands were steady when he placed them on my shoulders. We can go home now, he said softly. But I thought you'd want to know. No, I said. He blinked. No. We're going back. He frowned. Back? To the wedding. I nodded, fire in my veins. I'm not letting them toast to family being complete, while standing on top of money they stole from me. I'm done being the quiet sister. The afterthought. They want to erase me from the story? Fine. But they're going to remember this chapter. We didn't go straight back to the wedding. I wasn't ready, not yet. My rage was sharp and hot, but James convinced me to sit with it, not act out of impulse. Let's be methodical, he said. Let's be right and smart. So we drove home. I sat in the passenger seat with the folder in my lap like it was a live grenade. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. That scared me more than anything, that I'd gone so far past hurt, there wasn't room for anything but cold calculation. When we got home I changed out of the dress. Still smelled like roses and smoke. I threw it into the hamper and pulled on sweatpants and an old college hoodie. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I wasn't looking for justice yet. I wanted proof. James joined me and we started a digital autopsy of the last 2 years. First, we pulled up the original trust documents from my grandmother's estate. James had a copy from when we did a financial planning review after we got married. The terms were clear. The money was divided evenly between Carter and me, locked in until we each turned 30, with our parents acting as co-trustees. But here's the thing, trustees aren't owners. They're managers. Their job is to protect, not spend. Using my portion without written permission? That was a direct violation of fiduciary duty. A crime. We kept digging. James contacted a friend of his, a lawyer who specialized in estate litigation. Discreetly. Anonymously. Just asking questions at first. If a trustee misappropriates funds from a trust, James asked over speakerphone, but the beneficiary is still alive and can prove it, what's the recourse? The lawyer chuckled. Well, if they can prove it. Civil suit. Full reimbursement. Sometimes even punitive damages. And depending on the amount, criminal charges. I felt a cold thrill run through my chest. We weren't just talking about a family betrayal anymore. We were talking about fraud. And now I wanted more than an apology. I wanted consequence. The next morning I went to the bank. I requested a transaction report from the trust account under my name. I had to show ID and jump through some hoops, but James had already prepped the paperwork. The manager was polite. Almost too polite. I could tell she knew something was off but couldn't say it out loud. She handed me a printout in a sealed envelope. I opened it in the parking lot. The numbers didn't lie. Over $147,000 withdrawn across 5 transactions. All within the last 18 months. All labeled as reallocation, or venue reimbursement, or simply family event. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because they didn't even try to hide it. They just assumed I'd never look. That I was too meek. Too detached. That I didn't matter enough to notice. That made it personal. I scanned the rest of the ledger and saw even more damning evidence. Emails attached to approvals, digital signatures from my mother, transfers to an event planning company that matched Michelle's vendor list from Instagram posts I'd seen. It was all there. The cake. The venue. The trip to Italy they called a pre-honeymoon content shoot. All paid for in part by my inheritance. I didn't call them. I didn't scream or send an angry text. Instead, I called the estate attorney listed on the trust. A man named Greg Holloway who had worked with my grandmother for years. His voice was warm, older, tired, but focused. "Sabrina," he said, "I was wondering when I'd hear from you." That stopped me cold. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "Let's just say, I flagged some concerns last year when I saw the distributions. I sent an advisory email to your parents reminding them of their fiduciary duties. Never got a response." My throat tightened. "You knew they were spending it?" "I didn't know specifics, but yes. When I pushed, they told me it was a family-approved reallocation, and that you had signed off. They even forwarded a scanned document. I never signed anything. That's what I feared." Greg paused, then added, "You have legal standing to open a formal complaint. I can guide you through it if you want." "I do," I said, voice steady. "I want to move forward." For the next 2 days I worked with Greg and James like it was a job. We gathered everything: emails, bank records, screenshots, financial statements. I wrote a detailed statement outlining the betrayal, the false signature, the timeline of events. Greg filed the official notice of breach of fiduciary duty on my behalf and sent a certified letter to my parents notifying them of the investigation and potential litigation. It was surreal. I had grown up believing that justice was something other people chased. That people like me, quiet, overlooked, compliant, just swallowed unfairness like bitter pills and moved on. But now I had fire in my chest. And a paper trail to back me up. On the third day my mother called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, voice high and tight, dripping with performative concern. "Sabrina, sweetheart, we just got this strange letter from Greg about the trust. I'm sure it's all a misunderstanding. Please call us back. We love you." Love. They always used that word like a band-aid. Thin. Dave. Useless. I didn't respond. An hour later, Carter texted me. "What the hell is this about you suing mom and dad? You're seriously doing this now? While I'm on my honeymoon? Don't ruin this for everyone." I stared at his messages, stunned. Ruin this for everyone? They stole from me. Lied to me. Erased me from every celebration, and now I was the problem? That sealed it. This wasn't just a financial theft. It was a lifetime of being silenced. Dismissed. Buried. But not anymore. They might have underestimated me, but they forgot the most dangerous thing about someone who's been quiet for too long. Eventually they stop asking for a seat at the table. And they start flipping the whole damn table over. There's a strange kind of power in stillness. Not apathy. Not numbness. Stillness. The kind that comes when you felt every emotion there is: rage, betrayal, heartbreak, and burned through them all until there's only one thing left: resolve. That's where I was. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls from my mom, texts from Carter, even a message from my aunt politely asking if this whole lawsuit thing was just a misunderstanding. I didn't respond to any of it. Every word I could possibly say had already been said, in legal filings, in email attachments, in notarized documents. But I wasn't done. I wanted them to see what they turned me into. Not the quiet daughter. Not the forgotten sister. I wanted them to see the woman who knew exactly what they did, and who refused to let it slide under the rug. And that's why, 3 days after filing the breach of fiduciary duty claim, I walked into Carter's wedding brunch. Uninvited. Unannounced. Unshakably calm. The brunch was held at a boutique hotel downtown. Swanky, overpriced, and pretending to be charming with its exposed brick walls and eucalyptus centerpieces. Michelle's brunch look was already trending on Instagram. White jumpsuit, designer sunglasses, posing with champagne against a wall of fresh peonies like she just won an Oscar for most photogenic bride. I wore a navy pantsuit. No makeup. No jewelry. No pretense. Just the folder under my arm. James dropped me off at the curb, kissed my cheek, and said 3 words: Go end it. I took the elevator to the rooftop terrace, heart pounding but hands steady. The second I stepped out, the buzz of conversation dipped just a little. Not enough to be dramatic, but enough for me to know I was a ghost walking into their garden of curated illusions. My mother spotted me first. "Sabrina," she said, smiling too hard, like she thought if she looked sweet enough she could melt the ice between us. "What are you doing here?" I smiled back, polite, controlled. "Thought I'd stop by. Seems like quite the celebration." Carter turned in his seat. He looked exhausted and irritated, like he hadn't slept. His new wife, Michelle, looked me up and down with the same fake concern people reserve for homeless puppies. My father stood from his seat at the head of the table. "Sweetheart," he began, his voice practiced and rehearsed. "Let's not make a scene, okay?" "Oh, don't worry," I said calmly. "I'm not here to scream or cry. I'm just here to deliver something." I walked over slowly like a lawyer in a courtroom. Every eye on me. I placed the folder on the table, right in front of my father. Inside, copies of the trust document, the withdrawal history emails, my grandmother's original instructions, and the official notification of the civil suit. "You should have received the certified letter yesterday," I said. "But I thought you'd prefer the courtesy of a face-to-face handoff." My mother's face drained of color. "You brought legal papers to your brother's wedding brunch?" "No," I said. "I brought proof." Carter pushed back from the table. "You're really doing this? Here. You're ruining everything." I turned to him. "You mean the wedding that was paid for with money stolen from me?" He looked like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Not with a table full of aunts, cousins, and family friends now staring at us like this was dinner theater. "You lied," I said to my parents. "You forged my permission. You spent over $100,000 from a trust you were legally obligated to protect." My father's jaw clenched. "We were going to put it back." I tilted my head. "Before I turned 30? Or just, someday maybe?" Silence. "I would have never known if James hadn't looked into it," I continued. "You counted on that, didn't you? That I'd stay quiet. Stay small. Stay grateful for scraps while you funded a circus for Carter and Michelle." Michelle scoffed. "Wow. You're really that bitter over a wedding?" I ignored her. She was a mosquito in this narrative, annoying but irrelevant. "You know what hurts the most?" I said, looking around the table. "It's not the money. It's that you knew what this trust meant. Grandma set it up because she wanted me to feel supported. She wanted me to have options. You didn't just steal cash. You stole freedom. You stole choice." My voice cracked then, but I kept going. I had to. Every time I worked double shifts in college, every time I skipped vacations or cut coupons or paid interest on student loans, I had a safety net. One I didn't know you'd already shredded. My mother tried to speak, but nothing came out. Just a pathetic shake of her head. I gave them a small, tight smile. "I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to let you know. I'm pressing forward with everything. Civil suit. Damages. And if the DA agrees to look at it, maybe criminal too." The tension at the table was thick enough to slice with a knife. No one moved. No one defended them. I turned and walked away. No screaming. No theatrics. Just the sound of my heels tapping on the rooftop tile and the weight of something I hadn't felt in years. Power. When I got downstairs, James was waiting in the car. He didn't ask how it went. He didn't need to. He looked at my face, saw the fire still burning there, and smiled. "You did it." "I did," I said, closing the door behind me. "And I didn't break." He reached over and took my hand. "You didn't just not break. You redefined the rules." And I knew he was right, because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. Reclaiming my voice. Reclaiming my worth. Reclaiming everything they'd tried to erase. I wasn't always like this. I used to avoid confrontation. I'd bite my tongue until it bled just to keep the peace. I swallowed hurt like medicine, bitter, burning, but necessary. But sometimes the quiet ones don't stay quiet forever. And when we speak, we snap. Not like glass. Like rope. Tight. Controlled. With a single, deliberate snap that pulls everything apart. It started with the silence. After the brunch blow-up, no one reached out. Not immediately. Not even Carter. I think they assumed it was a bluff. That I'd cool down. That I'd feel guilty for disrupting their wedding week and come crawling back. But I didn't. I filed another formal complaint. This one wasn't just civil, it was criminal. Greg, my grandmother's estate attorney, connected me with a financial crimes investigator who agreed to open a case after reviewing the records. Falsifying beneficiary signatures was serious, especially when it involved six-figure amounts. The words criminal fraud were now officially attached to my parents' names. I had my copy of the filing framed. I'm not kidding. Then the calls came. First from Carter. "You're ruining their lives," he hissed into the phone. "They ruined their own lives," I said calmly. "I'm just pulling back the curtain. You don't get it, Sabrina. Mom's been crying for days. Dad's a mess. We're trying to enjoy our honeymoon and instead we're dealing with this circus." "Oh no," I replied dryly. "Your Italian honeymoon is being overshadowed by legal consequences? Tragic." He hung up. Next came my mother. Her voice trembled when she left the voicemail. She didn't sound angry this time. She sounded small. "We made a mistake. We got caught up in the moment. You don't understand, Sabrina. Carter needed help. He was under pressure and Michelle had these expectations. We thought we could fix it before you ever noticed." Fix it? Like it was a typo. She never apologized. She never once said I'm sorry. Just we thought we could fix it. And that told me everything I needed to know. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught. A week later it hit the rest of the family. Word got out. My aunt called. My cousin sent a long message saying, "I always thought your parents treated you differently. I just didn't realize it was this bad." People started asking questions. About the trust. About the money. About the history. And for the first time in my life, people started seeing what I'd been trying to survive in silence for years. My family's golden image? It began to crack. Turns out, when you build your legacy on favoritism, manipulation, and lies, it doesn't take much to shake it apart. Meanwhile, the bank officially froze the trust accounts. My portion. Carter's portion. The whole thing. There would be an investigation. A hearing. Possibly even criminal charges if they could prove the forged document was intentionally used to access funds. And Carter? He wasn't happy. He showed up at our front door unannounced 2 weeks after the brunch. James answered it, calm, collected. "I just want to talk to her," Carter said, glaring past him. James didn't budge. "Only if you're here to apologize. Otherwise, turn around." Carter scoffed. "She's tearing the family apart." I walked up behind James, looked my brother dead in the eye and said, "No. I'm finally forcing you all to see what was already broken." He shifted uncomfortably. "You could have come to us. We're family." I folded my arms. "You mean the family that didn't show up to my wedding? That gave me folding chairs while you got chandeliers? That drained my inheritance and pretended it never happened? That family?" He didn't have an answer. So I gave him one. "I'm not your doormat anymore. I'm not the forgotten daughter or the good girl who lets everyone else come first. You wanted to silence me. I'm choosing to speak." He left. And I stood there shaking but strong. The fallout snowballed. My father was asked to step down from a volunteer financial board he'd served on. Word of the investigation made its way to the local papers in our hometown, tucked beneath the fold, but they're all the same. Neighbors whispered. Church friends asked questions. And Michelle? She posted less and less. The influencer captions dried up. No more #perfectbliss or #family first in sight. Because there's no filter that makes betrayal look beautiful. Me. I started sleeping better. Not because it was over, but because I knew I wasn't crazy. Because all those years of second-guessing myself, of wondering if I was imagining the favoritism, the cold shoulders, the quiet dismissal, they were gone. The silence had a name now. Neglect. And my voice had a purpose now. Accountability. A month after the brunch, I received a letter. Handwritten. On stationery I recognized from my childhood. It was from my mom. "Sabrina, we didn't realize how much we hurt you. We thought you were strong enough to handle being left out. You always seemed so independent. We didn't realize we were breaking you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you understand. We were wrong. And we see it now. Love." It was the closest thing I'd ever gotten to an apology. I didn't respond. Some things deserve to be said. Others need to be felt. They weren't getting another chance to rewrite the story. This was mine now. 3 weeks after the brunch, the envelope landed on my parents' doorstep like a ticking bomb. Court summons. Signed. Filled. Served. They had 21 days to respond. At first they tried to play it down. My mom sent me a message the next morning. Can we please talk before lawyers get involved? This doesn't have to go that far. Too late. It already had. I didn't reply. They followed up with Greg trying to negotiate some kind of private settlement. He relayed the offer to me. They'd repay $50,000, apologize privately, and agree not to touch the trust again. I laughed. 50,000? They drained nearly $150,000, forged my signature, and emotionally erased me from my own family for years. That offer was an insult. I told Greg to politely decline and move forward with the lawsuit. They called it cruel. I called it justice. Carter messaged me a few days later, clearly typing with thumbs full of entitlement. You could have just talked to us. This is insane. You're ruining their lives and mine. You're bitter and petty. Michelle's in tears. So was I. For years. Alone. I didn't argue. I just attached a scanned copy of the trust. Page 4, paragraph 2. Read it slowly. Especially the part about felony charges for unauthorized withdrawals. He didn't respond. The next day Michelle blocked me on everything. Instagram. Facebook. Venmo. Well, guess the designer bags and professional couple photos couldn't cover the stench of public disgrace. The court didn't waste time. Once Greg submitted the compiled evidence, the ruling came swiftly. My parents were found in breach of fiduciary duty. They were ordered to repay the full misappropriated amount, $147,000. Pay $18,000 in damages. Cover my legal fees. Total, nearly $180,000. Greg told me later, this is one of the most straightforward rulings I've seen in years. You had them nailed to the wall. They had to sell their boat within a week. The sleek white monstrosity with sea-sowned love, painted on the side in cursive lettering? Gone. Next came the second mortgage on their house. The same house they refused to rent to James and me when we were struggling after grad school, saying they needed the space. And the cherry on top? Carter and Michelle had to cancel the construction on their 4-bedroom forever home. The one they kept showing off in renderings. The one Michelle posted a full Pinterest mood board for. They moved into a 1-bedroom rental unit in a cookie-cutter complex on the edge of town. With thin walls, no yard, and a broken mailbox. I shouldn't have smiled when I heard. But I did. Just a little. Of course they tried to save face. My dad told people at his country club that he was retiring early for health reasons. Not because a court ruling made him liquidate half his investments. My mother told anyone who would listen that we were estranged. As if I were a troubled child who ran off into the night with bad choices and tattoos. You know how daughters can be, she told a neighbor. I don't know what we did. She just changed. They never told the truth. Not once. But they didn't have to. Because the people who mattered. They saw right through it. My aunt, Mom's older sister, called me privately. I just want to say, I'm proud of you, she said. We all knew they treated Carter differently. But none of us ever had the guts to say it. That was the thing I kept hearing. We knew. We saw it. We were just afraid to speak. Turns out standing up for yourself doesn't just expose betrayal. It gives others permission to wake up too. There was only one moment that shook me. Just one. I got a letter from my dad. Typed. Not handwritten. Told. Clinical. Like he was still clinging to control. Sabrina. We're devastated by your actions. We feel betrayed by your lack of empathy and family loyalty. This has cost us greatly financially and emotionally. We raised you better than this. Sincerely. That. You raised me better? You raised me to be quiet. To be polite while you overlooked me. To smile while you clapped louder for Carter. To bury dreams because they didn't align with yours. You didn't raise me to be brave. I had to teach that to myself. James and I celebrated quietly the day the check arrived from the court settlement. Not because of the money. Because it was mine. Restored. Reclaimed. Earned. We used a portion to finally pay off my student loans. Another part went into a foundation I'd quietly started to help women fight back in financial abuse cases. Most people think abuse is just bruises. But theft? Gaslighting? Erasure? They leave scars too. A month later I passed my childhood home. I didn't stop. But I slowed down long enough to see the for sale sign on the lawn. The paint was peeling on the front porch. The shutters needed replacing. The roses Mom used to prune every Sunday morning were brown and curling at the edges. Pooked, small, worn, like it couldn't carry the weight of all the secrets anymore. And I didn't feel sorry. I felt free. People ask me now, do you regret it? The lawsuit. The public fallout. The rift it caused. My answer is always the same. No. Because for the first time in my life I stopped asking to be seen. And I demanded it. They still send invitations. Birthdays. Baby showers. Retirement parties for distant relatives I barely remember. Each one arrives in a cream envelope with gold cursive and some generic hallmark attempt at inclusion. But none of them include the thing that matters most. Accountability. So they go straight into the drawer I call nostalgia's graveyard. I never open them. I don't even RSVP, no. I just let them drift into silence, kind of like how they treated me for most of my life. James and I moved across the country a few months after the court ruling. We packed everything we owned, sold the condo and started over. Clean slate. No history lurking behind hallway photos. No family drama hiding in local grocery aisles. We bought a small home near the mountains, nothing extravagant but ours. The first time we stepped into it, I stood in the living room, looked out at the pine trees and blue sky, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness. Not joy. Peace. The kind that settles deep into your bones. The kind that doesn't need an apology to begin healing. Sometimes I think about that wedding. The way they laughed without me. The clinking of glasses, the string quartet, the six-tiered cake they claimed was for the guests, but really for the photos. The toasts where my name wasn't mentioned once. Not as sister, not as daughter. And sometimes that memory still stings. Because being erased hurts in ways you can't always explain. But then I remember the moment everything flipped. The brunch, the lawsuit, the courtroom silence when the judgment was read. I remember their faces when they realized the one they dismissed was the one holding all the power. I was never the quiet one. I was the one recording everything. I was the one watching, listening, enduring. And when I moved, I didn't just leave the city. I left the version of myself that let them get away with it. We built a new life here. James found a job with a remote team he actually respects. I finally launched the writing business I'd put off for years. Turns out there's a big market for ghostwriting real people's stories. And yes, a few clients even said, "This sounds just like something you lived through." They weren't wrong. Some nights we drink wine on our porch and watch the clouds crawl across the mountaintops. There's no noise, no city hum, no passive-aggressive text chains. Just wind, trees, two chairs and shared silence that feels like connection, not avoidance. One day James said, "Do you miss them?" I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, "I miss the version of them I thought existed." But that version was never real. He just nodded. He understood. They still talk about me, I'm sure. My mother probably tells people I moved away to find myself. My father probably blames James. Carter. He's probably still angry that I ruined the fantasy life they tried to build on top of my inheritance. Michelle. I checked her Instagram recently. It's private now. The curated perfection didn't survive the real-world cracks. Sometimes I get messages from people I barely know. Cousins. Old classmates. Women from back home who heard what happened and wanted to say thank you. Because they've been the quiet one too. The overlooked sibling. The dismissed daughter. The one who was told to stay in her lane, be grateful, don't make waves. And each time I hear it I think, maybe the real revenge wasn't the court case. Maybe it wasn't the money. Maybe it was the fact that I showed people what it looks like to stand up even when your voice shakes. Maybe the real power is reminding others that the quiet ones aren't weak. We're strategic. And when we rise, we don't just break the cycle. We rewrite it. I haven't spoken to my parents since the ruling. Not once. They've reached out, of course. Holidays. Guilt-laced voicemails. A few messages signed "Love, Mom and Dad," as if affection erases theft. But I don't reply. Because if they wanted a relationship they had their chance, for years. And all I ever wanted was to matter. Not just when it was convenient. Not just when there were photos to take or holidays to coordinate. But truly, fully, to matter. They couldn't give me that. So I gave it to myself. The last family event I ever attended was the wedding I wasn't welcome at. The one where I sat in the back, invisible in every photo. where my name was left off the toasts, where my money paid for the memories I was never meant to be part of. And yet, that day became my origin story. The moment the background character stepped into the spotlight. The moment the quiet one became the storm no one saw coming. So if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been the afterthought, the plan B, the second string, I want you to remember this. You don't have to explode to be powerful. You don't have to yell to be heard. You just have to be done. And when you are, don't ask for permission to speak. Tell your story. Loudly. Hurry. On your terms. Because revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's peace and a porch view, far away from the people who once thought you'd stay silent forever. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Your support means everything. If this story touched you or made you think, please subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories.